Good morning. We're continuing with our Godly Play videos for our devotionals. And you're going to watch our storyteller, our preschool director, Deshaun Work, share the tabernacle story with 2-year-olds. Now, I want you to recognize that these are 2-year-olds. They get a little squirmy at times, but it's amazing how much their attention is captured by the story and by the play set, the godly play set that's placed out before them. Now, I want you to see that and how it's a great tool for the kids, but I also want you to observe how many layers are put between God's people and the Holy of Holies in the tabernacle, where God's presence was believed to dwell the fullest among God's people. It was there at the Ark of the Covenant that was to be God's footstool. It was where their heavenly Father's feet touched the earth. And once a year, a high priest could enter into that space and make atonement for the people. Once a year. And you'll notice all the layers. And I want you to kind of count them up and pay attention to those. And then we're going to talk about the difference that comes after Jesus enters into the story of God's people. Enjoy.
You know that this is the desert. And people don't go into the desert.
No.
Unless they have to. It doesn't rain in the desert, so people are thirsty, and sometimes they can die. They don't grow food in the desert because there's no rain. People don't go into the desert unless they have to.
And they don't get in the desert.
Yeah. After God gave the people of God the 10 best ways and the 10 commandments, the people of God loved them so much. And they wanted to keep them safe with them all the time. So God told them to build an ark and cover it with gold. And they had poles that they would carry it everywhere they went. But you just can't walk up to something as precious as that. So they had to get ready. So God told them to build an altar to burn incense. And this altar, would, when they burned it, would have sweet smelling smoke. And they could walk in to the smelling smoke, and it would help them to get ready. But that wasn't enough, Riley. So God told them to put a table of gold and a special menorah that would light the way. It had 7 places for light.
For that big one?
Yeah, it kind of looks a little bit like that, doesn't it? And on the table, my friend, guess how many pieces of bread there were? 12. One for each of the tribes of Israel. And so the people of God, could walk past the gold table with all the bread. They could have the menorah to give them the light, and the sweet smelling smoke to get them ready to be with God. But it still wasn't enough. What, sweetie?
What is this?
I'm going to show you in just a minute. So then the people of God decided they needed to set this place apart. So they built walls. This was a special place.
That is a gate.
It looks like a gate, doesn't it?
But you need more. Oh, thanks.
And
Those are doorways.
they had walls. Oh, but there was one place in this special tent
Yeah, more
that was
right here.
only for God, and it was called the Holy of Holies. So, to get ready,
Big one. That's a big one right here.
yeah, we're going to leave that there because I want all my friends to see inside the temple.
And
So, we still weren't ready.
I took that off. But you need more than
The people, Ava, knew that to build the tent, they needed to cover it. And so they put a roof on top of the Holy of Holies and the places to get ready to meet with God. On top, they put a purple linen covering made of linen that was purple. And what do we know about the color purple? Do you remember?
Yeah.
What do we know about that color purple? It's a royal color. After that, they had lamb's wool woven together in white. They used tanned red ram's hide over the top of that. And then on the very top, they put tanned goat's skin on the very top. But that still wasn't enough. They decided they needed to set apart the tabernacle by creating a cloth fence.
They better not fall. They get
At this point in time, priests would take care of the temple. And so a bronze altar was added so people could burn sacrifices, and a little place, a sink, a little bowl to wash hands.
Did you take note? All the different layers. There's a fence. Of course, our storyteller begins from the center, working their way out, which I think is a beautiful way for the story to explain what the real focus is. But then there's a fence by the time we get done. That's all the way around the tabernacle. And there's the altar on the outside to prepare one to enter. There's the walls of the tabernacle. Now remember, the tabernacle is different than the temple. Tabernacle was a tent, and you had all these fabric layers over the top of it. But even once you entered in, there was yet another room, and that's where the high priest would go, in that space where the Ark of the Covenant was kept. And the 10 best ways are kept in there. Later, in another video, you're going to hear our kids tell us where the 10 commandments were kept, and they call them the 10 best ways. It's a way of teaching children, but isn't that a great way for us to think about God's commands for us, the best ways? And so there's all these layers that come between God's people and that Holy of Holies, being in His presence. And now I want to read to you from Hebrews in the New Testament, chapter 4, beginning in verse 14. And we see Jesus taking the role of that high priest, and we find out what the significance of that is for us. So the author of Hebrews is talking to God's people who are used to all these many different layers between them and God because of their sinfulness and their fear for entering into His presence. And listen to the transformation that has happened. Since then, we have a great high priest, speaking of Jesus, who has passed through the heavens, Jesus, the Son of God. Let us hold fast to our confessions. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but we have one who in every respect has been tested as we are, yet without sin. So the author is telling us that now God, through Jesus, fully sympathizes with our weaknesses in sin and temptation, yet did not succumb to them as we do. But having that sympathy, understanding, and paying our price for us, listen to what happens. Let us therefore approach the throne of grace with boldness. Approach the throne. So this was a place, the high priest, there are commands in the Old Testament that say to wrap a rope around the high priest as he enters the Holy of Holies in case he might pass out or might be struck dead, and no one else was allowed to go in. It was that severe, so they would just drag him out if he had some sort of health issue or something befell him. But now, let us therefore, as we are, yet without sin, but now, let us therefore approach the throne of grace with boldness, so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in time of need. And so even in the time of need, when we're feeling tempted, we can come into God's presence and be strengthened. We can do so with boldness. And you can see by all the layers of this godly play story how protective they were about entering into God's presence. And now boldly we just come into his presence because of the price that Jesus paid. Remember that today. Remember as you face trials or struggles or temptations that you can go to God boldly and he will listen to you, because we have a high priest who understands our struggles and trials, and he sympathizes with us, and he will see us through. Be blessed, be a blessing. Go in peace.